Welcome to In the Now with Jim Swilley. We're with our special guest, Zach Keough. Once again, would you please welcome Zach? Welcome. If you didn't see part one, please go back on the YouTube page and watch that because you'll need that context. And I'm not going to do a lot of repeating because we have so much to say, but in the last installment, Zach shared with us a scripture out of the book of Revelation where he talked about Jesus speaking to John and saying to eat a scroll. That right there should tell you why you shouldn't take the scriptures literally. Right. I mean, it's so obvious that it's not meant to be taken literally. Because when Jesus comes and says, eat a scroll, he wasn't cramming a piece of paper in John's mouth. Literalists would say, yeah, if you compromise on that, it's like, I think I told you this, but when I ran a Bible school here back in the early 80s, my secretary was very funny. And while she was working for me, I went to Israel. And when I came back, she was asking me about it. I said, her name was Darlene. I said, Darlene, one of the things was really interesting is when they were taking us on this tour, they showed us a locust tree. When it says that John the Baptist ate locust and wild honey, he wasn't eating like grasshoppers. There's a kind of a tree it's like a carob plant. It's like he was eating chocolate nearly. And she said, if you compromise on that, she says, I'm saying in Jesus' name, locust is a bug. Locust is a bug. And it was funny because I knew exactly what she meant. And that's the crazy thing about literalness. So John, of course, is exiled for his witness, and he's on the Isle of Patmos, which is why we have the book of Revelation, because he says he was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. And in that discourse, he didn't see an Israeli 33-year-old man. He saw this entity that still called himself Jesus, but he had hair like wool and eyes of flame of fire and a voice of many waters. So this was all symbolic. I don't believe there was actually a person standing there with fire coming out of his eyes. And just because we don't take the scripture literally doesn't mean we don't believe it's inspired. It just means we're at energy coherence. We're at a place where we realize the metaphysical is just as important as the physical, if not more so, and literalists try to force the metaphysical into the physical.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that statement. But I would tell you, and again, it goes back to...
Let me finish, hold that thought, because I want to finish this. He was saying, no, because I want to make sure I get this said. He was saying the scroll tasted good to me, yes, but then it turned my stomach sour. And your point was there are things that we have learned that seem right to us, yeah, but the more we ingest them, we have to move away from them, which is why even Jesus said, I've been physical for 33 years, but now it's necessary that I go away and become metaphysical again.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so again, it was a familiar taste. It was appeasing to the sensory organs, right? So something that John was obviously familiar with, and that was the information that he was familiar with, right? The old codex, the dated or legacy codex, which was really the law. But having been under the shadows of Jesus, if you will, in that ministry for a few years plus, he was exposed to a lot of information and new knowledge, and of course, absorbing what was really just didn't do him well, right? It didn't settle with his stomach. It didn't resonate with him. And that's, again, to your comment earlier, it's like when you go back to church now, knowing what we know now and been exposed to what we've been exposed to, going back to just a typical church, and especially for me, in my experience, I can't stomach it. Right. Honestly, I can't sit through it. I'm like, where's the closest exit? Because I want to run.
And it's hard to explain because people think that something's wrong with you. And you're like, no, I'm not being critical of you. You just can't imagine I'm in such a different space. And namaste, nama the heck out of that stay. You're like, that which is sacred
but
to
I
me.
But I can't stay.
Yeah, right. Nama, but I just can't say. Nah, I can't say. You want to honor it, but you also want to say, I'm in such a different place. I remember, Doc, even when your sister passed, you were going to the funeral. I remember Francis said, don't go into that place and let them speak a bunch of things over you. And it's tricky territory when you're doing funerals and stuff because you have to say stuff that people understand, but you also, it's different. And so I honor us all for, because there's no going back. Right. The Red Sea has filled back in. And, they ain't no going back. What is it? Once they've seen Paris, are you going to keep them on the farm? Like we've already seen Paris. We can't go back to the farm. The farm's awesome. God bless the people that still want to work the farm, but I got to go see the Eiffel Tower. All right. What are you going to say?
Yeah, so if we can cue the next slide here, there's a statement.
Hang on. The title, by the way, is Energy Coherence. Go back, Michelle, please. Sorry. Anyway, it's Energy Coherence. Energy Coherence, perceiving the interconnection of the physical and the metaphysical. This is part 2. Now, go. What you were saying?
Next slide, please. So this is a statement by Dr. Alberto Villoldo, who recently published a book earlier this year, back in January, February this year, called Grow a New Body. Now, in my research, I have my studies as well. I have been trying to find somebody that I could quote to help me draw that connection. And this is one of the quotes that he said in his book. He says, the effect of intestinal permeability, that is the stomach, we're referring to the stomach, on the brain can be dramatic and far-reaching: headaches, brain fog, poor concentration, short-term memory loss, and common symptoms. Some will experience depression or even anxiety. Others become hyperactive, impulsive, short-tempered. The toxic load on the brain, see how he makes the transition from the stomach to the brain?
Yeah.
Disables the higher circuits for love, beauty, creativity, and joy. That's everything that we wish to experience when we elevate to a higher level of consciousness, right? This is what he says. In this condition, you have absolutely no chance of experiencing the higher states of consciousness. So what are you telling me in this statement? What he's basically saying is your foods or the state of your stomach determines your ability to tap into a higher level of consciousness. Wow, and all this time I thought it was up here. But now what you're telling me, Zach, is it's down here in the stomach? Potentially, yes. Now, again, there's still a lot of study being made on this. So there's still a lot of research going on and whatnot. And I think in the coming years, and not the months, there'll be more information that is exposed to us or available to us that will help us to be able to better draw conclusions on this.
All right. What else do we have up here? Because I want to come back to this.
So let's start here. So we just came out of that series where we talked about the hormones and the neurotransmitters, serotonin and dopamine. So I want to focus more so on serotonin. Your body is comprised of hundreds of millions, if not billions, of serotonin, right? Which is 90 to 95% of it resides not in your brain, in your stomach.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So this, obviously, being a neurotransmitter, it has the responsibility of communicating a lot of information and sending signals from the stomach to the brain, right? So a lot of scientists and research now tell us that the gut is referred to as the second brain. Interesting, right? So this information travels along this highway it's the primary visceral nerve called the vagus nerve. It's this big nerve that connects from the brain to the stomach all the way down to the rectal area. Okay, I won't even describe what that is.
Nasty?
Yeah, I know it. I know.
Wait, this sounds like you're talking about chakras.
So, yes, it's anybody who's familiar with the energy centers or the chakras, the 7 chakras, right? That date from the crown chakra all the way down to the sacral chakra. So it does influence, I think, and again, I don't have the research to back it up. It's unsubstantiated. But I think it does influence those energy centers, right? And I'll touch on that.
You understand chakras are those 7 things that, yeah. Okay.
Energy centers, yeah, absolutely. So the enteric nervous system, right? This is the nervous system. This is not to be confused with the central nervous system, right, which is your spine and whatnot. This is a different type of nervous system that is affected by your stomach. 100 to 500 million neurons, depending on your source of information, right, resides in the gut. Serotonin is probably the most important of the 30 neurotransmitters that reside in the stomach. It's what puts you in a good mood. It's what helps regulate your sleep. Well, wait a second, I thought that was melatonin. Well, that's part of it, right? Did you know that melatonin comes from serotonin, which is excreted from the pineal gland in the brain?
Which
right?
is why if you go to bed worried or depressed or whatever, even if you're exhausted, you won't sleep well because
Absolutely.
the serotonin and the melatonin are very
Sure,
connected.
absolutely. So the thing that I want to address here in the imbalance in serotonin levels, right, is a thing called intestinal permeability. Some of you may have heard it by another name called the leaky gut. Now you're thinking, well, okay, well the leaky gut, from my understanding, is really just for people that have some kind of intestinal bowel syndrome, right? Not necessarily. Because every one of us in this room, if you eat out at any of these restaurants that you see here in the local vicinity or within proximity of here, or anywhere else for that matter, you see it because it's commonplace. Fast food restaurants are all over the place. Chances are, if you wine and dine at any of those facilities, you have some bit of sensitivity, if not some kind of intolerance to a certain compound, which I'll introduce here in just a moment. That compound prohibits the stomach, right, from producing serotonin, right? And if you lack serotonin, if there's an imbalance in those cells, what we call too is endochromatin cells, or EC cells, if there's an imbalance in that, it does not produce the serotonin that we need to keep us at a balanced state, okay? So I'll get into a little bit more specifically. I'm going to hit some of the wave tops because I know we're pressed for time. But this is, for start, is everybody tracking so far? Yeah. Right? Okay. Is this good information? Anybody bored? I don't see anybody sleeping. Okay, good.
Do you know what I sense? We're all hearing you with our spirit. And there'll be other things like we can fill in the blanks later, but like, no, you're in a zone. Keep going. We can dot the I's and cross the T's later, but we hear what you're saying. Go ahead.
So the stomach, again, when we think of the stomach, we have the stomach itself, but we also have the small intestine and the large intestine, right? So in order for the stomach is intended to process our foods, digest it, break it down, absorb the nutrients, then push that food down through the small and large intestines. But what intestinal permeability is the inability to process all of that stuff in our stomachs. In fact, it leaks some of those toxins and waste into our bloodstream, causing things such as lack of concentration, bad food cravings, sleep deprivation, you name it. There's a host of issues and symptoms that come with that because our bodies or our stomach somehow is not able to retain all of that into our system. It leaks it out into the bloodstream, right? So what helps with that? And I'm going to kind of, help you in identifying some things that would at least compel you, not force you, but compel you to make some changes in your dietary habits. And I hate using the word diet because diet usually is referred to me as is synonymous with a fad, which is temporary in nature, right? So my hope is that you make some changes to your lifestyle and your eating habits. That's my hope for you, right? Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so there we have it. Intestinal permeability, which is leaky gut. Number one is the gluten. That's what some refer to as the gut buster, right? So gluten is, let me give you a backdrop on where gluten is or what it does to our system, right? So gluten is a compound that's found in a lot of our wheats and grains, right? For some of you that don't know the history of genetically modified organisms, or GMOs as we refer them, genetically modified foods, this was something that farmers began doing back in the 70s, right? So and it was done with good intent. The intent was to genetically modify our food so that it produces more food for a growing population, right? Because the world has expanded in population since that time. So increased demand, we need an increase in supply, basically. So genetically modifying those organisms allows us to meet that demand, but it also does something inadvertently to the human body, right? And that is because there's added sugar within that genetic engineering that takes place that the body is not able to break down accordingly. And in fact, it does stuff to our stomach lining that causes or allows for permeability. So when we consume it, we become more sensitive to other ingredients, right? Not just gluten. Gluten is really kind of the cause for that. In fact, since the 70s, and we're talking genetically modified gluten, right? The gluten that obviously that they ate back 70 years ago is not the same gluten we eat today. Okay, so let's get that clear. So what does that mean for us? There is twice the amount of sugar, twice the amount of gluten within wheat in our grains today than there was 70 years ago, right? When we consume this forces the body or compels the body to produce a protein called zonulin. Zonulin was not discovered until the year 2000, just under 20 years ago, by a gentleman known as Dr. Alessio Fasano. Okay? This gentleman, when identified this particular compound within our system, realized this one thing, that the body does not digest completely gluten. So what happens to it, right? If it doesn't pass through our intestinal tract, where does it go? It goes into our bloodstream, right? And it wreaks really all kinds of havoc on our system. So now, again, thinking about what we just talked about, now if we have on this, in the vagus nerve, which is a two-way communication street between the stomach and the brain, what do you think the signals are that are transmitted from the intestinal area to the brain, right? Because once it goes into the bloodstream, the body automatically reverts to an autoimmune process. And I can't even begin to tell you the host of problems this presents for us, okay? Do we need a break?
Yes, put a comma right here, but let me say before we go to part 3, because this is really good stuff. And I don't know how much you can connect the dots to everything, but when you start talking about things that changed in the 70s, think about how different things are now. What, 30, 40, 50 years ago, once in a while you'd hear somebody's grandma was senile. Now you hear everybody's got Alzheimer's or dementia. Once in a while you'd see a kid that had some issues. Now autism is just, my God. And I believe in vaccinating kids, but even people that are trying not to vaccinate their kids, people are just desperate trying to find out what the heck is going on. Back 50 years ago, if a woman died of breast cancer, it was such a rare, unusual thing. Now you hear it all the time. It's 1 in 3. So I'm not saying this is the answer to everything, but when you hear something, you think, well, people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So let's find out anything we can because something is going on. You know what I mean? Now it's so, the first thing you hear when you see somebody's elderly, the first thing somebody asks is, are they in their right mind? Because it's like you don't hear it, people, it's so common. I mean, just, like I remember even when I was in, I don't know if this is connected to it, but I just think about, when I was in grammar school, elementary school, I never heard anybody having a peanut allergy. Everybody in the world made peanut butter sandwiches. Now it's like, I can't be in the room. And I'm just saying something major has shifted. And so, yeah, asthma, everything. Like, that was such a rare thing. Now it's rare when people don't have it. So let's keep examining it from every possible area. It doesn't mean you stop praying. It doesn't mean you stop believing in God. It means you open up all the channels. David said, you lead me in the paths, plural, of righteousness. Let's put a comma right there. Please check out part 3 because it's going to be the best one yet. Thanks for being with us on In the Now with Jim Swilley. Tell Zach we're glad that he was here today. Appreciate it.